Welcome into another episode of Betting the Pitch, MLB edition. This is MLB playoffs episode, and I figured might be a quick hit because we only have 4 games to discuss, no real futures to really talk about, but let's get into it. So if you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. Best spot to get my leans, write-ups, and plays before I make them, or right as I make them in terms of locking in prices. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It'd be huge for me in the search rankings. And if you are not a member of BetOnline, go check it out. All lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description and fund your account and use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. You can also get 50% at sportsbetting.ag with a link below that BetOnline one in the podcast description. Would highly recommend getting more outs. And of course, it's always good to spend 50%. Oh boy, here we go. It's always good to get 50% extra of casino money to spend, essentially. So as I have a million calls coming in, of course, as we always do when we start a podcast, very professional. Sorry about that. But anyway, let's get into it. I'll start with the Tuesday or Monday games we got. We'll start with Philadelphia, a 1-0 lead on Atlanta. Pretty good performance from Ranger Suarez in the opener. And ultimately one that was very profitable for my clients and myself. So that was a good one. And we'll try to keep this going. Zach Wheeler on the mound today against Max Fried. Fried has been really injured for a lot of the season, has been injured for a lot of the past few years, really, while Zach Wheeler has been about one of the most trustworthy arms in baseball. Opened at Fried minus 160 favorite at home with a plus 135 coming back on Zach Wheeler. It's now kind of shortened in between that range based on the better lines. You get 13-cent spread at BetOnline. Currently Fried a minus 152 favorite, Wheeler a plus 139 underdog. Over under is 8. It opened there. It's taking a little bit of under money, but that's probably based on Atlanta really not doing much. And we've seen that from the higher seeds that have really earned great spots and great positions to get a bye, and then really coming out flat after what seemingly was maybe a week off from baseball, or a little bit less than that. I don't know that things necessarily change. Zach Wheeler has had a really good run against really all teams in Major League Baseball, but has been pretty competitive against the Braves. The Phillies were also the team that knocked out a better Braves team last season in their, I guess, run to the World Series, which was pretty unexpected based on how they played the season, how they finished the season, all that sort of stuff, but got a little bit hot in the playoffs. And you can argue that the Phillies and their style of play really suits playoff baseball because there's not a lot of runs being scored. All these teams are going for it. They're making quick changes to their bullpens. And then home runs are really what changed things. And as we saw that in game one, we saw it all through the playoffs last season. Philadelphia were able to do that. So I'm pretty interested in the Phillies plus 139 right now. Unfortunately went with a run line in game one, which is still, profitable venture, but could have gotten a lot more if I had played a Phillies side. Nothing really has really changed here. Max Fried is a lefty, which does line up a little bit better with Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper, but ultimately he hasn't done a lot to deserve a ton of trust. Philadelphia bullpen's got a lot of big arms in it that can strike people out, and that's another name of the game in the playoffs. Atlanta, to me, haven't really looked sharp in their bullpen for a while. I feel like that's probably the weak point of the team, and that's actually if Max Fried has a decent outing, because I think there's still plenty of questions about him, and he's a pretty big favorite this afternoon or early evening, depending where you are in the United States, or if you're listening somewhere else. Who knows what time it is where you are, but it starts at 6 Eastern U.S. time. So I'm looking at Zach Wheeler, and they might make it the Phillies as my best bet. Try to put an ultimate best bet for the end of show, so I can cut it into some sort of reel and make everyone on YouTube or Instagram happy. For the next nightcap on still on Monday night, we have Arizona and Zach Gallen visiting Bobby Miller and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Pretty incredible first game from Arizona, coming off a pretty big upset in Milwaukee in the first round, the wild card round of the playoffs. Now they get their stud pitcher in game two, which is pretty important. And I think really, I think Arizona will go as far as Zach Gallen can take them. He's kind of survived a lot of hard contact for a lot of the season, but ultimately has been impressive and gotten really good stats out there. Is in the NL Cy Young race. On the other side, Bobby Miller, younger pitcher for the Dodgers, has certainly had some fits of inconsistency. Throws the ball really hard, like over 100 at times, or at least hits triple digits, which is pretty insane for a starting pitcher because a lot of times they're saving some bullets and leaving a little gas in the tank. I'm not sure that Bobby Miller goes very deep in this game, which then puts a little more stress on a good Dodgers bullpen, though. So that's probably the design of how they want to do it. Arizona on the other side, they want to keep Gallen in as long as possible. The Dodgers are going to probably work some at bats and try to make him really throw a lot of pitches, potentially get Gallen out of there early. I don't know with UCL damage from a few years ago if there's more of a leash on Gallen, but I would imagine at around 100 pitches, they're trying to either get him out of there if it's the end of an inning, or potentially get through a few pitches after that and maybe potentially go to the bullpen. That's my biggest concern with Arizona is their bullpen. I'll now get into the number. So similar opener, Dodgers minus 160 at open, plus 135 coming back the other way for Arizona with a total of 8.5, slightly juiced to under. We now have a minus 149 on Bobby Miller at home. That Arizona price is plus 137, so pretty close to that opener. And then the total actually has dropped from 8.5 to 8. So some under money coming in, probably an idea that, or based on the notion that Gallen has some success against a really potent Dodgers lineup. And then also Bobby Miller can get through an Arizona lineup, which has been, it doesn't have the power that Dodgers have. Not really anybody does besides maybe the Braves and the Phillies, but Arizona have been able to string a lot of hits together. Maybe the market is not really believing they do that again today. My biggest question, if you're backing Arizona, certainly the price makes sense. I mean, you win that bet. I mean, it's if you consider it a coin flip, plus 137 is great value. Probably isn't to that type of degree, but Arizona should be competitive. Gallen should keep them in this game. And really my concern, though, is if you're backing Arizona, you feel like you probably need a lead with their bullpen coming in, because Seawald closing has kind of gotten used spit and glue or whatever to get through a lot of things late in games. Hanging sliders as his like out pitch is really a dangerous game to play, but certainly they can get swing and misses. So maybe that sometimes is valuable, but high sliders are really not the way you want to go, and especially not in 2023 and not against the Dodgers. Imagine that motivation is pretty strong on both the home teams' sides here in the NL, considering both have lost the opener game. But does that make you squeeze the bat a little bit harder in the box? Does it make you press a little bit more and be a little more fine with your control and you make more mistakes, or you throw more pitches off the zone or off the plate? Those are concerns. So I guess I lean both dogs in the NL on Monday's game slate. And then I feel like I'm not sure I have a great feel for the total in Atlanta. I feel like 8 is very low for those two offenses, but certainly not a lot of runs scored in the first game. And then the Arizona bullpen is my biggest concern in the nightcap for the Arizona Diamondbacks visiting the Dodgers. I still think the money lines on both underdogs is my biggest interest. Now moving to Tuesday, we have only American League play here, as the National League teams will be traveling to the opposing sites. And Houston, with a pretty tough performance last night, were a small favorite to the Minnesota Twins and really fell behind right away with 2 outs in the first inning, and then never really recovered. They start Christian Javier at Sonny Gray starting for the Twins. Sonny Gray opened a minus 135 favorite, over under is 8. A little bit juiced to over, plus 115 coming back the other way on the Astros. Not a lot of movement, as you probably wouldn't expect late in the season. The openers are going to be probably pretty close to where these numbers close, unless there's some weird injury or absence or something that's inexplicable or unexpected. Current number at Bet Online, Minnesota and Sonny Gray minus 128 favorite, over under is 8. And so it looks like there's been a little bit of movement to under ever since this line's come out. And really just a kind of thinning of the spread or the margin or the handle at the sports books. So Bet Online only doing 10 cents here. I think under minus 130, they do 10 cents everywhere. So that's a pretty good sign, and certainly is a good spot to save some money. So if you're not a member of Bet Online or haven't joined yet, go check the deposit link in my description, because you'll get a bonus 50% if you use GW50 on your first deposit. Not sure if it works on reloads, but you can try it. Anyway, Christian Javier, so 2-pitch pitcher, fastball, slider, has been working in a changeup because he hasn't been as effective with those 2 pitches. I have major doubts about him, though if he's good, he can certainly knife through a Minnesota order. It's just really hard to know what he'll do. Sonny Gray on the other side really kind of had a rough early part of the season. Those stats were good, was getting pulled pretty early in outings, but he's been about as reliable as you can ask for. And honestly should be able to get through a Houston lineup that looked very quiet in game 2. And Sonny Gray's got the stuff, got the accuracy, got the control that will be a big problem, I think, for Houston at some point today. Or on Tuesday. I was not expecting that Sonny Gray would be this big of a favorite, though. Minus 128 on to me, a bad Minnesota team, but I've learned the hard way in not expecting them to get through that first round series, and also really not expecting them to put up much of a fight against Houston. And I feel like the marketplace has kind of felt the same way, making Houston a pretty big favorite to get through a series price, but also being favored to win the, not odds on, but odds off favorites, the cheapest price to win the American League pennant. I guess with this price, I'm interested in Houston. I think I'm more interested, in over 8. The Minnesota crowd was awesome in the Blue Jays series, but and probably should be expected to happen again for this series and the next 2 games that are going to be played in Minnesota. I just don't know that I can really get down. Minnesota's certainly been playing better. What a great start. Besides losing game 1, but that was a pretty close competition, I think, in Houston. Nearly came back from the dead in that one, put some pressure on late, but then winning and kind of leading throughout start to finish was pretty good in that game 2 performance. So I'm going to be watching and waiting and seeing. And if Minnesota can get a win here, I'll be very surprised if they can knock out Houston, but it'd be a storybook run and just another explanation or factoid that the Major League Baseball playoffs are incredibly unpredictable. Last but not least on this episode, I'll go through Baltimore visiting Texas, which is a little bit confusing. Baltimore has no starting pitcher out, but we do have lines. It's probably going to be Dean Kramer, I would suspect, though it could be Kyle Gibson or a combination of them piggybacking each other. Can't imagine Grayson Rodriguez will be anywhere near available for this one. And Kyle Bradish, I think, is also one of those other arms that isn't really that impressive. Baltimore, the 1 seed here, but they're on the ropes, down 2-0 or 2-0. So too many soccer podcasts on the mind, but down 2-0 in the series is not a great position to be in. Of course, going on the road for 2 games in Arlington. Tickets are pretty expensive. I was looking at potentially buying a cheap ticket last minute. Might still do that. If anyone's got any extras in the Texas area, Dallas area, let me know. I would love to take one because I'll probably be there on Tuesday night if I can make it happen. But Nathan Eovaldi is looking like he's a lot healthier than he was for, ever since a great start to the season, looked very unhealthy. And then when the IL came back, was really bad, was trying to rehab in the majors, but has been pretty lights out. Was very good at Tampa and has been better towards the end of the season. With some hiccups in there, of course. But Baltimore doesn't really look like the team that they were playing like earlier in the season. Their bullpen's a little bit worse. They're in this type of series where they're not able to get wins against teams they're better than. They've looked pretty inadequate. And as we saw from the pennant market, that wasn't really a lot expected of Baltimore, considering they were a 1 seed with home field advantage throughout. Of course, that would obviously make them up there to win the AL pennant, but ultimately being behind Houston was a bit surprising. Yes, they might have had a more difficult run with Tampa or Texas in the winner of that series, but Major League Baseball does not reseed, which is absolutely insane. Regardless, looking at this matchup, we have Texas open to minus 140 favorite. Over under is 9, or was 9, and is 9 actually, and juices split both ways. It's really kind of stayed the same place. We now have a minus 139 at Bet Online from Texas, and then on the Baltimore side we have a plus 128. My thoughts are Dean Kramer, who has put up some really great stats this year, but they felt a little hollow. Didn't have great fantasy numbers, wasn't a big strikeout guy, and that's a big concern against a Texas team that looks like they're hitting the ball and just hitting it just as well as they were earlier in the season. It feels like the Atlanta Braves have morphed back into the Texas Rangers, because Texas was the best lineup for the first few months of the season. Then it kind of deteriorated, had some injuries to get through, but Adolis Garcia has been matching ever since he came back from his knee injury. Josh Young has not really been doing the same, but the rest of the lineup's been picking it up, and they've been able to drop Young to 8th in the lineup, and he's still producing there. Plus a great 9-hole hitter in Leody Taveras. It's just really hard to see where Baltimore will have success. So price here, Baltimore is very, very potentially undervalued, seeing a plus 128 on the 1 seed, but they haven't been playing that way. Still haven't looked good. at all in this series. Had tight loss in game one, but then got hit around really hard in game two. And I feel like the Texas bullpen has been better of late, but really ultimately there's not a huge discrepancy here. Baltimore used to have one of the best bullpens in baseball. I feel like they overworked it and then ended up losing Felix Bautista. It got them the 1 seed, which is certainly what they're shooting for. Winning the AL East and then getting to the playoffs is a big deal for them. But it feels like that might be the top or the ceiling for the Baltimore Orioles this season. I'm not sure they lose here. I don't really like Eovaldi at a minus 139 type of price. But I feel like it almost feels like the Orioles have kind of run out of gas and things aren't going great for them at this point in the season. So like I said, I guess I'll get to an ultimate best bet now, coming to the end of the show. Thank you for tuning in. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It'd be huge for me to really do more of these if I get more hits and eventually can start turning this into a lucrative process. It's not there yet, to say the least. But if you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. That would help too. And then, of course, reviews, 5 stars would be huge. And any sort of comments, if I see them, I will read them. No matter what sport they are, I'll try to gear them to the sport you're talking about. But anything you want in there. And of course, check out patreon.com. It's @real_G Warner. The link is below in the podcast description. It's best spot, especially if you're subscribed or other places, to save a little coin, and you get access to me directly. My leans coming overnight, plus my thoughts and kind of my feelings and how things change during the day. Because ultimately, we're playing the stock market when you bet sports, but you're also really, I want to look at lineups to know exactly what I'm looking at each game before something starts. So now it's best bet time. So let's get into it. This is the @real_G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. And this is Betting the Pitch MLB edition for Monday, October 9th, covering game 2 in the NL and game 3 in the AL. So my best bet for Tuesday, I really like the Phillies plus 139, Zach Wheeler on the mound. And then on Tuesday, I'm most interested, I think, in Christian Javier plus 118 underdog on the road at Minnesota. For my best bet on this episode, though, I'm going to go with Zach Wheeler and the Philadelphia Phillies. They won the series from Atlanta in Atlanta last season. Got a good start in the opener. Atlanta really hasn't seemed like the same team. A little rusty after getting that first series off. We saw Philadelphia do the same run last season all the way to the World Series. Zach Wheeler, I know, can get outs against an Atlanta lineup, which has been great and been one of the best, if not the best, in baseball. Max Fried, I have a lot of questions about. He hasn't been healthy for years. And I think he's going to have a lot of trouble keeping the ball in the yard against a really powerful Philadelphia lineup. So that'll do it for this episode. Take the Phillies plus 139 is what I'm looking at right now. I'm actually in no rush. Might want to see it kind of get pushed up or bet up a little bit higher as the Atlanta money might come in on the home team, plus teams that are expecting the 1 seed that everyone expects to win the World Series, potentially get a good bounce back here, but the price is too good. Plus 139 is really nice. So I will talk to you all on Tuesday night for a NFL podcast. We had a nice 2-0 this week. Andrew Schnicker and I, _Schnicker on Twitter. Go give them a follow. We're trying to grow this as much as we can and try to keep those winners flowing. So we will talk to you all very soon. Thanks for coming in, and hopefully this wasn't too brief.